How we doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Richie, and I am here with my guys, Mr. Mike Zappi, San Antonio, Texas. And we have a new guest to the show, my good friend, Mr. Eric Perry, Atlanta Falcons superfan, just a great dude. Welcome to my show, Eric. Pleasure to have you here. Introduce yourself. How did you become a fan of these Dirty Birds?
Deion Sanders and Andre Rison. I mean, back in the day, they were, the two that I look forward to watching the most. And I kind of faded off a little bit. And then whenever Vic came in, then it was super fan from then on.
Yeah, Mike Vick definitely was a huge marketable player, not to mention even in the video game world. To this day, many people will fight and debate that the game with Mike Vick, Madden I'm talking about, literally the best Madden to this day. I actually share that sentiment in terms of just he was a game changer on the field. He was a game changer off the field in terms of the video game entertainment. And one might ask, why am I talking about the Atlanta Falcons? We are doing the NFC South preview today, and this is a division that's going to look a lot different. Last year, you had Tom Brady starting for the Buccaneers. He has retired for real this time. Desmond Ritter's in his second year, but he did not start the opener last year for your Atlanta Falcons. The New Orleans Saints have had a bit of a quarterback carousel last year, whether it be Taysom Hill, Jameis Winston. This year, or actually Andy Dalton as well, this year they bring in Derek Carr. Carolina Panthers traded up for the number one pick. So, these are all going to be new faces. And in Tampa, there's a quarterback competition between Trask and Mayfield, which Zappi actually brought to my attention. It appears that Trask is in the lead because I'm not going to lie, I haven't been up on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the excitement left the building when number 12 left. But without further ado, as anyone who watches these division previews know, we always start from the bottom, move it on up. 3 teams finished with the same record, second, third, and fourth, but the Falcons had the distinction of being the 4th team last year, and we're going to start there. The Atlanta Falcons finishing 4th in the NFC South with a 7-10 record. Some key losses. Quarterback Marcus Mariota is now an Eagle. Cornerback Isaiah Oliver is on the West Coast with the Niners. Defensive end Abdullah Anderson signing with the Washington Commanders. Maybe they'll be the Redskins again. We shall see. Quarterback Michael Ford signing with the Cleveland Browns. Wide receiver Olamide Zacchaeus is also signing with the Eagles. We have some key additions. The veteran, the ageless wonder, Calais Campbell. We've got former Bengals safety Jesse Bates. Quarterback Taylor Heineke, also of those Commanders. Outside linebacker Bud Dupree. Wide receiver Mac Hollins, all via free agency. Everybody knows Bijan Robinson's name, especially if you play fantasy football. He is up on that list. Matthew Bergeron. And as the viewers can see, we're going to leave this ticker on just to keep you informed on what I kind of zoomed in on as the key games. Gonna start with you, Zappy. I feel like I'm getting dry mouth over here talking. What are your thoughts on this division? And starting, of course, with the Atlanta Falcons. Definitely a team that I think upgraded this roster in terms of talent. They definitely should be a player in this division.
As far as this division goes, I think it's going to be a very oddly close division between 3 teams, believe it or not. The Carolina Panthers, we already know. This is a young team. They're going to be at the bottom of the division. Atlanta is the team that I'm actually expecting to surprise a lot of people. We saw how they were playing last year. They were playing very good competitive football, and they were doing that with the likes of Tyler Aguilar at running back. And now you insert Bijan Robinson, and not to mention you have Cordell Patterson there. I think they're going to rely heavy on the running game to try to take as much pressure off of Desmond Ridder moving forward. And I'm a fan of Drake London. I think he's going to make the necessary steps to become an eventual number 1. But he's still young, and I think his curve is going to take a little longer as opposed to like those of a Jordan Addison or something like that, who's going to hit the ground running, And as far as defensively, you still have Grady Jarrett on that defense, and then you have a Calais Campbell. I think that's going to help that defense.
It's a lot of credibility, as well as bringing in a hell of a leader, because Calais Campbell, any program he's ever played in, he has been a great contributor.
He really has, and it's not just the contributions he makes on the field; it's the contributions he makes in the locker room as well. He is the definition of a team leader, a guy that you ask your young defensive players to go look up to and ask questions and just pick his brain. Looking at this Atlanta schedule, I definitely think that this team has a ceiling of 10 wins and a floor of 8 wins. That's where I think they're at. I think they're going to be hovering right there at the 500 area. I have Atlanta winning this division this year. I like this team a lot. I really do. I think Kyle Pitts will go back to the guy we're expecting him to be. I think this is going to be a fun offense to watch. And when you play in the NFC South, it is up for anyone to grab. And
Eric's I like this guy. I'm coming back on this show.
Right. No, I like what the Falcons. I trust this Falcons roster a little more than I do that of the Saints, Buccaneers, and of course the Panthers. So I have this team finishing 10-7 to win the division with the 4th seed in the NFC.
I'm not going to speak for too long, because I know Eric is probably looking forward to getting on his team. I'm going to say this. You make a good point, Zappy, when you spoke about how competitive they were last season. It's even chronicled in the Netflix special Quarterback. It's a pretty good watch if you haven't seen it yet. Marcus Mariota, a guy who I have a ton of respect for, and just a great pro, but, definitely holes in his game. And they were exploited at some of the worst times and critical moments of particular games that I feel that the Falcons could have won last year. That could have been the difference between being a team that wins 10, like you just alluded to, or a team that wins 7 like they did last year. Bijan Robinson, Eric and I off air briefly spoke about this. And I guess I'll just ask you guys as a panel, and I'll let Eric kind of take it from here. Do you believe that Bijan Robinson is ultimately is he too overhyped? Is it like a little too much too soon? I think is what I'm trying to say.
As a Falcons fan, I hope the hype is justified, but I think he's going to be a great player. But the way that they're ranking him in fantasy formats as number 3, I don't think it's going to happen, mainly because of volume. I mean, Tyler Algier rushed for 1,000 yards last year. We still have Cordero Patterson. So, I mean, it's a 3-headed monster there. I don't think he's going to have, unless he just comes out of the gate and they can't take him off the field. He's going to have to do that to live up to the hype. If he starts off slow and Algier picks up where he left off, Patterson sprinkled in there, he's just not going to have the volume to be that number 1 guy that everyone has just been talking about. But as a Falcons fan, I hope he turns out to be as great as everyone is saying.
It's interesting, Eric. Sorry, Zappy. I'm going to pass this to you. It's actually a pass right to you. Zappy made a mention to me the other night how Bijan Robinson didn't even play. And that a lot of times in the preseason, that is reserved for pretty much lockdown positions. Now, I'm a firm believer that no matter what program you're running and what offense you're running and who the coach is, it's always a great decision in today's NFL to have a committee backfield, because I think it's always great to have fresh legs. But I did take Zappy's point and I said, man, they are giving him that big respect off the rip as a rookie, even within his program. If he's not playing game 1, that's showing that he is, until proven differently, at least what they're seeing in camp, the chosen number 1. Zappy, go ahead.
I fully expect Bijan Robinson to come and hit the ground running. We have seen it with him since his days when he was at South Point Catholic High School in Tucson, Arizona. We saw it when he was a 4-star recruit too. And when he hit the ground running in UT, he never looked back.
He gives me the AP vibes, bro.
That's exactly what he is. He is an Adrian Peterson, except he is a much better pass-catching running back. That's the one thing that separates him from AP. I like Bijan. I think Bijan is going to have one of those rookie years that we saw from the likes of an Ezekiel Elliott, perhaps a Dameon Pierce, things like that. I don't think he's going to go for 300 carries by any means, but I do believe that this guy is going to be able to get 225 to 250 carries this season, get 1,200 rushing yards, and probably anywhere from 8 to 10 touchdowns on the ground. Because he's got the explosiveness to do it, but not only that, it's his field vision that separates himself from others. It's just he sees the hole and he goes, and he has a tendency to not only act like he's going to go to that hole. If he sees another one bouncing it outside, he will do it. I love Bijan. I think that is why the Falcons have a much better chance of winning the division, is because of the addition of Bijan.
I'm actually with your opinion in terms of their overall record. I've got the Falcons finishing 10-7. The only issue here is I got them finishing second. I do believe in the NFC. That will still qualify them for a playoff berth. In the AFC, 10 is not a guarantee. I've been saying this on previous shows because we've done quite a few AFC shows. As far as Bijan goes, and I'll flip it back to Eric, with his backup Tyler Algier, last year having a 1,000-yard season, if this kid can say match what Bijan does, getting close to 1,000, that is a hell of a 1-2 punch. And of course, you always have to account for Cordarrelle Patterson, because even in the NFL where kick returns are not a thing anymore, Cordarrelle will still score one kickoff return a year in a league that has tried to eliminate that play, and that speaks on his greatness as a special teams player. Not to mention that he's incredibly versatile. So Zappy and I both agree on 10-7. Our main disagreement is I got the Falcons finishing second. What is your overall opinion, Eric, just for the whole body? I know, I think to a level you guys do catch a little bit of a schedule break. Maybe not as much as the Saints, but your floor is yours, bud.
Yeah, as far as the record, I was kind of laughing a little bit when he was talking about the record, meaning Zappy, because he said the floor is 8-9 and the top is 10-7. That's exactly where I have him as well.
Oh,
and
wow. Okay.
How I come up with that is the 8-9. I always look at our division as a split. We're going to beat the Panthers, Saints, and Bucks once, usually at home, vice versa. They usually beat us whenever we go on the road. So if we split 8-9, I feel the Saints are the top competition in that division. And out of respect, I could think they could possibly beat us both times. So if we beat the Bucks and Panthers both times, Saints beat us both times, that's where we end up with a 10-7. So if we split with the division, I think we're 8-9. If we can pull out, an extra one or two of those division wins, then 10-7. And I've got us, if we're 10-7, I've got us winning the division. If it's 8-9, I see a second to the Saints. So as far as division goes, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on that, and that's actually where I'm getting my 8-9 to 10-7 record. But I actually think you guys are going to be able to beat the Buccaneers each time this year, and I think you're going to be able to beat the Panthers, because the Panthers, it's not about this year. They're going to be
it's a big transition.
Horrible team this year.
The Buccaneers are a tough one to figure, just for the sheer fact that they still play defense. So they always have that puncher's chance if they can get some kind of quarterback play out of Trask or out of Mayfield. My final for them, these Falcons I'm talking about, 10-7, and I got them as the 7 seed.
Okay. I like it. I'll take it. If we can get another playoff berth, and get over the Super Bowl debacle that we won't need to get, bring up. I brought it up and we don't need to talk about it.
Week 18, that's the game. That's the game that's going to decide your division. It's crazy to say that's before anybody's even snapped the ball yet in a game that mattered. But I really do see it going down to the wire. And in a weird way, if my 10-7 is correct, and this is not something that I think most people would see coming, I think there's a possibility that the NFC South is sending 2 teams to the playoffs, because obviously, as I already stated, I got Atlanta as my wild card. I don't think – because when people think about this division, like, oh, this division's weak. Well, hold up. You have 2 bad teams. That's a benefit for the 2 good teams.
Exactly.
It's
and
a weak
as far
division.
Go ahead.
It's a weak division playing the weakest division in the AFC.
Well, that's the marriage that helps, because it benefited our division last year. New York Giants were 4-0 against the AFC South. And we all know how terrible our record was in our division. But to Eric's point, you got to win those division games. Before we move it along to the main roadblock, I would say, for the Falcons. Eric, anything you want to add on the way out?
Yeah, just looking at our offense, our defense is going to be totally different from last year. All the people we brought in, David Onyemata from the Saints, actually, he could be a big difference, on that D line to help Grady Jarrett out. And on the offense, our weakest area is receivers. I mean, Mac Hollins, I saw him a little bit last year. Is he a true number 2? I don't think so. Scotty Miller, he's going to plug in there. I think Tom Brady made him better than what he is.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not a firm believer. I'd love to see. I mean, we have Jonnu Smith. I think he's a little banged up right now, but he's going to be a nice addition to the tight end room. I mean, we could possibly have, I'm looking at my sheet here, we could have Ritter, of course, at quarterback, the 5 linemen. We could have Drake London, Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts, Patterson as the other wide out, and then possibly put Algier and Robinson, even, put Robinson in that second, take Jonnu Smith off for Robinson with Algier in the backfield. I would love that spread on offense.
I quietly like the Jonnu Smith move because I like the idea of having 2 athletic tight ends on the field at the same time because, I'm sure as a Falcon fan, as Zappy alluded to, we've talked about this off air plenty. Kyle Pitts, I think this is the particular year where he finally has the bust out. But I also think that when you run those 2 tight end sets, Jonnu Smith could eat a little as well because, he and Hunter Henry are only like 2 years removed from being quite a pair. And I'd like to think that if he has a Kyle Pitts next to him, he could do a little better than he did in New England. But sure. It appears that we all have the Atlanta Falcons in the playoffs. I know Brett's not on the show tonight, but he was very big on your Falcons this year. So I'm going to quote him. He thinks you're going to win the division. I know that you have to be up very early tomorrow, Eric. Saints are next, so if you care to hang for a few more, we can talk about your rivals. And,
I'll try to hang for a few minutes, and I'll let you know whenever I gotta drop off.
Buddy. All right. We're going to move it along to the New Orleans Saints. Last year finishing 3rd in the South, same record, 7-10. Key losses, Andy Dalton. He is now a signal caller with the Panthers. Defensive tackle David Onyemata signing with your Falcons. You just mentioned him. Shai Tuttle signing with the Panthers. What I notice about a lot of these South teams, they when they leave, they stay in the division more than any other division in football. I noticed that a lot. Marcus Davenport signed with the Vikings. Caden Ellis is a Falcon. Key additions, running back Jamal Williams. This is an addition that I actually really like for this team. It's going to try to reinstill the Ingram Kamara days. Quarterback Derek Carr. Yes, Brett, he's going to improve this year. Tight end Forster Moreau, who I actually believe is underrated. Trey Turner, good pickup. Max Garcia, good pickup. Doing some work on the O-line. And Kendre Miller, this could be a guy that can be a lot better, a lot quicker, because he's going to get a quicker opportunity with the Kamara suspension. I have the key games down here. It goes without saying, you got to win your division games. At Jaguars, as they are a rising star of a team. Week 1 versus the Titans. Week 15 against my New York Giants. Week 10 at the Vikings. Week 13 versus the Detroit Lions. Okay, Chris Olave coming off a hell of a rookie campaign with sporadic quarterback play, I think would be the best way to explain what the Saints were last year. Kamara, as I mentioned, 3 games out. I don't think it's going to hurt them as bad as people think, because I do have a feeling that Miller is going to be up to the task of sharing the ball with Jamal Williams. And I think they're going to give him the volume that a Kamara would get if it was that way. I think the real X factor for this offense to work all the way properly is, can Michael Thomas regain some kind of form of a few years ago? I think the pressure is a little bit off now that Olave is the certified number 1. I actually do believe that Michael Thomas is going to be a decent contributor this year. And I guess if he contributes well enough, he could be a candidate for comeback player of the year. I personally don't believe he's going to contribute on that level. When I look at this Saints team, it's similar to how I looked at the Jets last year. This is a team that has had a consistently very strong defense, but has just had such erratic quarterback play ever since Drew Brees left. And if you really want to be honest, even when Drew Brees was at the tail end of his career, because his performance became rather pedestrian towards the end of his career. I am picking this team to win the division with a record of 11-6 for one simple reason. Obviously, you're in the same division, so you play a lot of the same teams. But Colin Cowherd, of all people, who I usually don't agree with, brought up a hell of a point, and really honing in on how the New Orleans Saints, more than any other team in the league, have really dodged every bullet of playing a premier quarterback. And ultimately, I think that could be the X factor that wins them this division. Something as simple as that, because I do believe that Atlanta and New Orleans are that close. I think ultimately, quarterback for quarterback, the only difference is I just have a little more faith in Derek Carr because he's been doing it a little longer, and I think he has a lot to prove this year. I got them going 11-6, but those two meetings, particularly Week 18, I think is ultimately going to decide this division. So if I'm wrong, it happens in Week 18. I do believe that to be true, barring injuries. We can never forecast that.
This team, I have a hard time getting a read on this team, to be honest with you. Derek Carr's there. Look, I stand by what I've said about Derek Carr in the past. I don't think he's much of a quarterback, and I don't think he's going to be an improved quarterback. The guy's been in the league since 2014 and has managed to take the Raiders to the playoffs twice. 2016, when he broke his leg, and then, of course, in 2021 when they made that late run with Rich, however you say his name. I have too many questions on this team defensively.
Rich Bisaccia.
Rich Bisaccia, thank you.
Thank you, Quentin Moore. He told me that guy's name once, and it stayed in my memory.
What I like about their defense is obviously you still have Cameron Jordan there, but he's a year older. But I really love their secondary. That's the one thing I love about their defense. When you have a Marcus May as well as Honey Badger there.
That's part of the reason, pal, that I think these guys could outlast the Saints. But, it's going to be a tough one.
It is.
Rather the Falcons, excuse me.
Yeah, I got you. And that's, it's going to be interesting because the Saints do have a good defense. They were top 5 last year in overall defense. In rushing yards, though, that was their weakness. And that's why I have the Falcons beating them, because the Falcons will be running the ball. The Saints' rush defense was not that great. It was their pass defense that was phenomenal. The Saints' rush defense, I want to say, was in the 24-25 area. And I don't think they really did much to address that personally. As far as Michael Thomas goes, look, we've been waiting for him to go back to that explosive player he once was. That's never going to come back, in my honest opinion. I love Chris Olave, but he's not going to be able to do it all by himself. Alvin Kamara not being there the first 3 weeks of the season, I truly believe is going to actually hurt this team. And that's going to be the difference between them winning the division or finishing in second. Especially, they start off the year against Tennessee. I have that as a loss. They go to Carolina. I have that as a win. But week 3 is the one I have as a loss when they go to Green Bay. I think Green Bay is going to sneak away with a win on that one. This team is very similar to the Falcons. I see them as a team with a ceiling of 10 wins and a floor of 8 wins. I think they're going to finish 9-8. I really do. I think Tampa Bay is finally going to avenge a lot of these losses and be able to steal a game here. If you look at the Saints schedule, it does get very interesting from week 9 all the way to week 15. So there's a lot of games in there that they could easily lose with the Bears, Vikings, Falcons, Detroit, and the Giants, Carolina being the one.
I would have to think that when Colin said that comment, he wasn't accounting for Goff, nor Fields, nor Daniel Jones. I think Fields is a little higher up than Jones right now, just in terms of what he accomplished from a statistical value. Daniel Jones accomplished it on a winning value. I do believe this year he's going to have a similar year to when the West Coast offense, Pat Shurmur brought it in, rookie year. Goff, he's coming off a good year. Do it 2 years in a row, and then I could say, okay, he's finally arrived. Because with the Rams, he was like a mixed bag. But I still think these matchups are rather favorable for the Saints.
it's going to be, it's interesting because it's so hard to get a read on them. It really is, because I have to see it with Derek. I've been waiting for him to show me for years. I don't see this offense as a better offense than the Raiders last year or the Raiders over the last few years. Alvin Kamara is not the Alvin Kamara of a few years ago.
I tend to agree. That's part of the reason why Kendre Miller is going to be more vital than people realize.
I like Kendre Miller. I think he's going to be a very good starting running back in a year. Jamal Williams is not supposed to be your bell cow. He is supposed to be the guy that's going to come in and do your third down yardage, get you in the end zone. I mean, the guy rushed for 17 touchdowns last year. But when I look at, I
think they were all against the Giants, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, probably.
All 7. He had the career game against us.
No, I can't, because I have them losing to the Packers and because I have them losing to the Buccaneers. That's the reason why I have them being a 9-8 team. Good for second place, not good enough to make the playoffs. I don't see 2 teams making it from the South because I have two from the East, 2 from the West, and 2 from the North.
All right, we're going to see how this shapes up. Eric, your thoughts on the Saints?
Yeah, you talked about the defense, and they've still got Cam Jordan. Caden Ellis, one of their linebackers, he's great, but he plays for us now. David Onyemata, great lineman. I've hated him being over there for years, but he's with us now. So their defense took a big hit. Our defense got a lot better. So in that aspect, defense down. Offensive firepower, they've got Olave. They've got an older Kamara. They've got Slant Mike, as Gardner Johnson would tell him before he punched him in his face. That he runs slants, and he doesn't have the speed that he used to be able to take advantage of those slants. So I don't think he's going to be much of a factor. Foster Moreau, he's not a top tight end, but he has a rapport with Carr. That could be something, they're going to work on coming from the Raiders, but I don't think it's going to be enough to, be a top offense. So I think their defense is going to have to try to step up and keep them in a lot of games.
They're going to have to.
And I think it's interesting too, because I don't think the Saints are comfortable with what they have at receiver, because they would have never brought in a Jimmy Graham, a guy that has been around for a long time. They do have Juwan Johnson as their starting tight end, a guy I like. And then you still have Taysom Hill, a guy that I think the experiment is over. Let's move on.
I don't think I've ever done this on my show before, so there's a first time for everything. After truly hearing what you guys said about the Saints and why you don't think they're going to win the division, I'm gonna back up my original prediction, and this is my official one. New Orleans Saints 8-9, Atlanta Falcons 10-7. Because the more I think about this, I'm like, wait a minute. If I'm sending 2 teams from this division, where are my Giants going to be? Go home, Saints.
Go home. No, there's just too much.
No, but being serious, you guys actually won me over with your points. I'm not even joking. You both won me over, and I said, wait a second. Maybe I am overestimating this New Orleans team, because when I think about how important it is to have that second receiver, and you, Zappy, know this very well. You finally replaced Amari Cooper. Last year, that shit hurt you. And I mean, my team, Christ, we didn't even have a number 2, let alone a number 1. So that was a masterful coaching job by Mike Kafka and Brian Dable. I'm confident with what I'm saying now. You guys have flipped my mind on this. Saints are missing the playoffs with a respectable 8-9 record.
I'll take it.
All right. Zappy, do me a favor and talk about the Panthers for a minute.
They're in Carolina. They traded away multiple first-round picks and DJ Moore. They got Bryce Young. They're going to win 3 games. That's about all we need to talk about.
3 wins, 14 losses. I'm going to do one. Can I really give them 4 wins? No, I don't think I could. They also lost Deontay Foreman. He's a Chicago Bear as well with DJ Moore. DJ Moore was last year. They're not going to be good. They're just not going to be good.
Look, these are the things I like about the Carolina Panthers.
They have great colors.
They do have some pretty awesome uniforms. The division was not for this year. I think that goes without saying. You brought in a very good coach to take over this team and build. You got your quarterback in Bryce Young. Your receivers, you have Adam Thielen and DJ Shark. The one that I'm actually excited about is a guy that I think resembles a little bit of Anquan Bolden, A.J. Brown, and that is rookie Jonathan Mingo, who they drafted out of Ole Miss in the second round. He is going to be another great Ole Miss receiver. I truly believe that. Watching this kid play college football over the last couple of years, he's got the it factor. He will fix up the little things that prevented him from being a top first-round pick. But I really believe that Bryce Young and Jonathan Mingo are going to develop a very good chemistry.
But that's the good thing if they tank out this year and are bad, that they're going to be in a similar position next year to continue to have good drafts. That's the hope.
But they don't have a first-round pick next year. That's that's
right.
The downfall.
You're right.
So, but what I do, and of course, this is a team that just 2 years ago, they were at one point ranked as the number one defense in the NFL.
Yeah, ain't that crazy?
And it is. And you still have guys like Brian Burns to be able to go out there and build around. But when you really break down the Carolina Panthers, you can't expect them to be more than possibly a 4-win team. You're asking way too much from this team right now when they are one of the younger teams in the NFL. I just can't see them winning more than 4 games. I don't think there's much to really say about them except for the fact that the vision is for 3 years down the road when they, I believe, will be competing for division titles again.
Eric, you could bury them now if you want to, because I don't even think they deserve any more breath from the two of us.
Yeah, I mean, they've got some key additions, Miles Sanders, Thielen, Chark, but it's not going to be enough. And I'm actually going to be similar to the Carolina Panthers, and I'm going to leave the show early because that's pretty much what they're going to do. It's not going to take too long to realize that, they're not going to be there come playoff time.
I want to say one thing to you before you leave.
Yeah.
You made a quick mention about your one worry maybe about your offense, not necessarily knowing for sure how strong your number 2 receiver is. There is this free agent that made a hell of a living and a hell of a Hall of Fame career in that uniform. His name is Julio Jones.
I would love nothing more. I would welcome.
I was thinking about it, dude. I was like, it would kind of be cool to see Julio back in a Falcon uniform.
Never say never. Hopefully they can make it happen, finish his career there, and maybe get us back on a Super Bowl run, maybe win one for him. I'd love to, if we made it to the Super Bowl, sign Matt Ryan if he's not on a team, just to have him be on the team so they can both win one.
Yeah, have him get on that bench.
Just don't put him in the game in the fourth quarter.
Anywhere after the middle of the third, he will not be in.
Just don't do that, and you'll be all right.
Guys,
I've seen some heartbreaks, but man, that was a different level. You're always welcome to be on this show, Eric. Just want to extend that to you. And during the course of the year, man.
For sure. Thanks for having me. I'm glad I could, help change your mind, and kind of.
You honestly did. The combo of both of you made better points than my defense of the Saints. And when I'm wrong, I'm like, you know what? I think you guys made a better point. I'm going to own that one. And out you are, Saints.
All right. Well, I'll definitely, be on the show again. I appreciate you guys having me, and you guys have a good night.
Same to you, brother. You're always welcome here. Have a great night.
Have a good one.
All right. Rise up.
Yeah, it's, and I really look at this Carolina Panthers team of, it's just, there's too much, man. Like, I like the vision. I really do. But you can't sit here. No one can sit here and convince me that Adam Thielen, a very aged Adam Thielen.
I was actually shocked that of everywhere he chose to go there. I'm not saying that when you're at his age, you have a plethora of options. But at his age, I was like, damn, dude, don't you want to win something? Why are you going there?
I think at some point you just have to concede the fact that you're not going to do it.
Maybe so. I mean, money's money too. There wasn't a bad contract that they gave him, and the man still has a little bit in the tank. It is kind of sad to see him leave Minnesota.
It really is, especially because of the big fact that he's from Minnesota. Like this is Adam Thielen grew up not too far from where they used to play football,
It's got to suck on that level, I imagine. Enough about these guys. Let's talk about a team that is a few years removed from their second Super Bowl victory. They actually won this division with a losing record of 8-9. A losing record will not win it this year. They lost to your Cowboys. They didn't just lose. They got their ass kicked. Key losses, previously mentioned Julio Jones, he's a free agent. Tom Brady really retired. Leonard Fournette, still a free agent. I do think he has a possibility to sign somewhere. Ronald Jones is a Cowboy for now. He might be a cut. Raheem Nunez-Roche signing with my Giants. Actually, a guy I'm excited about adding to our roster. Sean Bunting, no longer Murphy Bunting, signed with the Titans. Quarterback Blaine Gabbert signed with the Chiefs. I actually think he's going to be a pretty good backup for Mahomes. Keanu Neal with the Steelers. Great pickup for them. Key additions, Baker Mayfield, who you mentioned to me off air, is not winning that quarterback job just yet. New York born and bred Chase Edmonds, running back. Greg Gaines, Chase McLaughlin, really good kicker. Kalijah Kancey in the draft, love that pick. And I actually think that Payne Durham is a quality pick too for a late round tight end pick. This is the thing. I don't have this team finishing last because nobody's worse than the Panthers. I'm going to say it like this. I think their absolute ceiling is 7, and I think their absolute floor is like 4. But I'm going to predict that this team goes 5-12.
Oh man, it's crazy you say that because I'm looking at Baker Mayfield, and there was once a time where he led the Cleveland Browns to the playoffs and came very close to defeating the Kansas City Chiefs.
Not to mention he flipped the narrative when he went into Pittsburgh and won over there.
Exactly. This roster, at least from the receiving point of view, is a better one than what he had in Cleveland.
Well, from the receiving point of view, this roster can still lay claim to potentially being the best receiving situation in this division. But that's the thing. If they're sucking, is Mike Evans and Chris Godwin going to be on the trade block?
I don't think they'll be. If anyone's going to be on the trade block, I would think it'd be Mike Evans before Chris Godwin, just simply because Mike is a little older than him.
There's more interest, too, because Godwin doesn't have the resume. We know what he's capable of doing, but I would say he doesn't have the resume as an Evans. Evans is the perennial 1,000-yard guy, whereas Godwin is supposed to be Godwin is supposed to be that guy. Is Godwin a good one? I'm having a moment here.
Chris Godwin.
Jesus. Chris Godwin can't stay healthy is the point I'm making. And that would be a concern, too, for anyone that wants to trade for him. But Mike Evans, perennial Pro Bowl receiver. Kyle Trask, you really think he's going to win this job? I don't know.
Really, is either one a better option? Here, I'll put it to you this way.
I want to believe that Baker is the better option.
I'll put it this way. Look, this team, they're going to be in a lot of games. We are talking about this defense that was ranked number 8 last year in the NFL. You throw in the fact that they added a Kalijah Kancey to team up with a Vita Vea. That middle, they're going to be controlling the middle a lot in a lot of games. It's going to open things up for guys like Devin White, Levante David. Where I think this team is going to be hurting is more, I still have a lot of questions about that offensive line. We know that they suffered a lot of injuries last year. Ryan Jensen, how is he going to be coming back? Tristan Wirfs, he's moving over. He's at the left tackle now. But, it's just when you look at this Tampa Bay Buccaneers schedule to start off the year, it's very possible that their first win doesn't come till week 9 versus the Houston Texans. They're at Minnesota. They host Chicago, host Philly, at New Orleans, host Detroit, host Atlanta, at Buffalo, and then at Houston. That is a gauntlet for a team like this where you have a lot of uncertainty at the most important position in the NFL, and that's the quarterback position. What's the point of having 2 top-tier receivers if you don't have the quarterback that can get you the ball? What's the point? And then you have Rachaad White, who I like, but I like him better as a number 2, not as a number 1 running back.
I tend to agree, but having said that, whether it's good philosophy or not, I think he's going to have a very good year and might actually be a steal in fantasy football for a very bad Buccaneer team. Let me look for positives. just so that way people that watch this are like, man, we're not that terrible. I still think that they have a good defense. I still think that they play good defense. But having said that, the guy who coaches their team should be a defensive coordinator, not a head coach. That's a whole nother conversation. I feel that Byron Leftwich should have been the guy. I've also had a really murky suspicion that in the event that Todd Bowles gets canned during the year, there could be a weird situation where maybe Bruce Arians comes back downstairs and does something similar to what Mike Holmgren, Bill Belichick did, wearing the GM and the head coaching hat. Because I'll be honest with you, when Antonio Brown left that Jet game in the middle of the game unceremoniously and just like, what the fuck just happened when we were watching it on the tube, there were so many moving parts to that story. And while I'm not going out of my way to defend Antonio Brown's decision-making or rationale, I also don't think the Tampa Bay Buccaneer organization nor Bruce Arians were in the right either. And I think that was a motivation that put him upstairs to kind of get away from that and then come back later. I don't think he's completely done with coaching, and I think he really loves that situation he has there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is Bruce Arians may very well take over, and if it's not this particular year, it might happen in the offseason. But I think Todd Bowles, guy who I actually do have a lot of respect for, he's a good football man. I just don't think he's a very good head coach, and it's not for everyone. I mean, dude, I absolutely adore Steve Spagnuolo. And right now I'm actually watching America's game, the 2007 New York Giants, the iconic head nod between Tom Brady and O.C. Umenyiora, speaking of Spags. But, I guess what I'm saying is just some guys are not meant to be head coaches. And unfortunately, in Todd Bowles' case, I think they chose the wrong person. I think Byron Leftwich was more qualified.
Here's another thing to keep in mind, though, and I'm happy you brought that up because I was going to, and it's in regards to Bruce Arians. Look, Bruce Arians, we already know, won the Super Bowl a couple of years ago.
He sure did.
He finally got his.
He sure did.
But the big thing to remember, even when he left after the 2021 season, Kyle Trask was drafted while Bruce Arians was there. I am honestly seeing a scenario where Baker Mayfield is going to win the starting quarterback job, but he's going to eventually be displaced by Kyle Trask. And to piggyback off of what you said, I do believe Bruce Arians will also be the coach and be a big reason why Kyle Trask takes over, because he knows him. He was a part of that draft decision where Baker was more of a, well, we need another quarterback for quarterback competition. Baker, like Johnny Manziel, like Kyler Murray, I just have never thought that they were going to transition and be great quarterbacks in the NFL. It's weird that we're talking about Oklahoma quarterbacks here, but it's just
if Idris was here, he'd be all over this one because Idris is very opinionated in the trend of thinking that you're on right now, that you don't go there to get your signal caller.
Yeah, you don't, but for that reason, I agree. I definitely think that Bruce Arians, in some shape or form, will take over as the interim head coach, because you don't have Byron Leftwich on that team anymore. And I don't see a scenario where, hey, we're going to fire you, Todd, and we're going to call Byron to come be our interim. If I'm Byron, I'm saying, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. You had your opportunity and you passed me up. It's just this Buccaneers team. I agree. I have them at 5-12. Too many question marks on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they're going to stay in games, but when it comes time to closing that game out, when you don't have that bell caliber running back, they won't be able to do it. But I will say this, fantasy football wise, if there's two receivers you should really be looking at, it would be Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, because I do think this team is going to be playing from behind a lot, and they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. So they're going to be getting all those extra yardage they're going to be able to pad those stats.
That did actually cross my mind. And, our fantasy draft is around the corner. Cheddar in the Sun League, we are doing our draft on the 20th. So we are basically, in another hour, it's less than a week away. And to those that don't know, Zappy and I are the defending co-champions, a decision that was made based on the events in the Cincinnati-Buffalo game where Damar Hamlin had a heart attack and thankfully has made a recovery. And he's actually going to be back on the football field
He played yesterday.
Sure did, and
accounted for 3 tackles. It's
did.
Good that he got that out of him.
Yeah, absolutely, and yeah, absolutely. And I remember it's so weird because I remember you literally a few months ago, in between the season, made a mention of he has to get that first tackle out of the way. It's great to see him back on the football field. Undeniably, probably the scariest moment I have ever witnessed, and I'm sure I speak for millions of people.
Wow. So, as we're talking about the South, Saints running back Kendre Miller may be missing some time.
Bro, I got out of that fire just in time, and you know what? I'm going to change my prediction again. The New Orleans Saints are going 7-10.
7-10. They're just going to keep dropping.
Wow, Rich, you're real.
Hey, but
profit.
But here's the thing, to go back to the
football
Saints,
gods didn't want me to pick them.
No, what do we have? 14 minutes here left. Look, going back to the Saints, you've got to bring in Kareem Hunt.
Yes,
you have to bring in Kareem
now
Hunt.
The pressure is on now. This is another first. We never flip it back like that in a division preview.
No, we don't. And it just came across right here. And I'm like, oh, Kendre Miller is going to be missing some time. That is very interesting. Another thing to bring out, where I'm going to keep it in the South, but I'm going to go to the AFC side of things. Jonathan Taylor is expected to finally show up to camp.
I saw that, and that is a great thing for not just Colts fans, but for his career because, dude, I know that in the running back, whether it's the running back market or just an unhappy workplace because you're not winning, it goes really quicker than any other position in this league. And he's still he's like entering his peak. So even if he wants to get relocated, I think it's in his best interest to play his heart out and see if he can help a young team surprise some people because while the Jacksonville Jaguars emerged pretty much out of obscurity last year after the Urban Meyer disaster, and seeing King Henry miss those games and a Tennessee team have issues at the quarterback position, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if Jonathan Taylor is Jonathan Taylor, and if the Colts could get some adequate quarterback play, I would not rule out the possibility that they could be potentially in that mix. Now, obviously, we already did our South show, but hearing Jonathan Taylor coming back, that adds a dimension to this because when we did that show, it was before Jonathan Taylor had the issues of talking about wanting out of town.
I will say the one thing that I find very intriguing about this division this year is I stand at probably a strong 75 to 80% that I believe the NFC Offensive Rookie of the Year is going to come out of the NFC South. And it's going to be a race between Bryce Young and Bijan Robinson. Jahmyr Gibbs, I believe, will be in a close third. And you could look at the guys like Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Jigba. But you tend to see quarterbacks / running backs get that award as rookies. And most of the time, they're going to the quarterback position.
It happened with Saquon.
It happened with Saquon, correct.
It happened with Garrett Wilson last year, keeping it in MetLife for a second.
Mm-hmm. So I will say that is the one thing that I am interested in is to see who's going to have the bigger impact this year. Truthfully, I think it's Bijan. Bryce Young, he's going to have a lot to learn.
Agree with you. I actually think Jahmyr Gibbs is a prime candidate to finish second for that award. We'll see how it pans out. Let me ask you a question for like a sleeper pick. What about Miami's new draftee joining the two former 49er running backs? What are your thoughts on him?
I love Devon Achane. I love him. I think I've said it. He reminds me of a Jamal Charles. And which I'm going to back up 1 second. The other thing I forgot to point out in regards to Bijan Robinson, if there's one thing UT has always been good at is producing NFL running backs. But coming back this way,
I tend to agree, dude.
I love Devon Achane. I think he is going to be that change of pace running back that they need. But what's crazy is Raheem Mostert is already one of the fastest running backs in the NFL.
Yeah, he is. He really is.
Now you got to worry about Devon Achane, who ran, I believe, a 4.32 40 in the NFL Combine.
The big knock that I've seen from some people, and the worry, I guess you could say, oh my God, look at this guy. R.W. McQuarters. Sorry, buddy. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but I'm looking and it just happened, and I'm like, hey, buddy, I'm sorry. That's my quarterback. Okay. He didn't say it like that. There was some mocos and tears, but to T.O.'s credit, that was probably one of the more real moments of his career, and I think that speaks more of who he was as a real person because the media did that man dirty. I did want to speak on something non-South related, but definitely football related, and this is kind of like a little teaser for our upcoming AFC East show. We'll keep you informed on when that's going to drop, when we're going to do that one. But Aaron Rodgers, bro, it is so cool to see him so happy because I think it's like anything else. We've seen it happen with many an athlete that you never thought would change uniforms. I think that there's a little bit of both. Sometimes it's on the player, sometimes it's on the organization / fan base, where you can tend to like almost not appreciate a guy to the max level. You know, we've seen it happen with Brett Favre. We've seen it happen with Patrick Ewing in basketball. We've seen Emmitt Smith, dude. Emmitt Smith put on a Cardinal uniform. That is like the weirdest thing. You know, we saw it with Hulk Hogan going to WCW.
Did I just say that? Jerry Rice, Joe Montana.
You know, the people stopped appreciating Hulk Hogan, and that's why, you know, he won over to Billionaire Ted's organization.
I was gonna say, when I saw Hulk wearing what was the NWO colors, that was the day I lost respect for Hogan, to be honest with you.
Dude, you know how many kids are crying in the front row? My late father, I was standing right next to him, and he's like, hey, did you see what happened at WCW yesterday? And me, I was always a WWF, at that time, WWF fan, above WCW. I mean, I tuned in a little bit because I had a high respect for Ric Flair, and I used to like their cruiserweight division. But, you know, keeping it away from there for a second, if you haven't, guys, you got to check out this particular Hard Knocks. Normally in the past, Hard Knocks has always been kind of like a curse, and, you know, because you always have a crappy team on there. But this New York Jets team, and I may very well be attending Jets-Giants in October, there's going to be a different kind of electricity, not only going into that clash of MetLife Stadium, but more so just the Jets in general. As a Giant fan, I'm enjoying that they got all the hype because I think the Giants always perform better when they're under the radar. And I will say this, I don't think this is a publicity stunt. I know that they have issues on the O-line, and we're going to hit on that on our East preview. But I have a feeling that this team could be special, if not this year, possibly next year. But acquiring an Aaron Rodgers right now, they have basically invited themselves to the table, joining the Bengals and joining the Chiefs.
I mean, hey, look, we got to grab it out of the hat, elephant in the room. Tampa Bay Buccaneers did it with Tom Brady. The Los Angeles Rams did it with Matthew Stafford. Teams are now making that move for that veteran quarterback when it might be the one thing you need. Last year, the Jets were a 7-10 team, but if they had somewhat of a competent quarterback, that team is easily an 11-win, possibly 12-win team.
And you know, it's so funny.
Insert them. Yeah.
It's so funny because this is like literally what they need. And if you want to track it back to the other famous Packer that put on a Jet uniform, revisit that year. If Brett Favre doesn't get hurt and play hurt that year, the New York Jets back in 2008 are a Super Bowl contender, especially in a division and in a conference where you weren't going to have to deal with Tom Brady because he got hurt that year. That was the year that the late Tony Sparano lit the NFL on fire with the Miami Dolphins Wildcat offense. Rest in peace to him. Definitely a game changer. And I just loved Brett's faces that he was making. Watching this go down, the missed tackles, the confusion, just the anger, just the literal anger that Brett was experiencing on the other tube that was right next to it, the New York Giants were handling business against the Cincinnati Bengals with TJ Houshmandzadeh. And Chad Johnson, he wasn't Ocho Cinco yet. He was still Johnson. Can you tell this guy's ready for football? I'm over here talking about getting like introspective moments in the past.
I got to send a shout out to my man. I mean, This is one of the guys that I was a huge fan of. I believe he was one of the best college football players of this generation right now. That being Deuce Vaughn. Last night, watching him play, watching how, I mean, you've got to get low to take him down. I am excited to see what this kid can do. I mean, we're talking about guys like a Darren Sproles, where you don't need the hole that big for him to get through. And we saw it a couple occasions yesterday where he hit the hole, a small hole, and he's gone.
But especially in today's NFL too, because yesteryear, smaller guys had issues. Mm-hmm. Barry wasn't a big guy, and Barry had a ton of yards for loss. But you also have to take into account, and this is an interesting thing to think about. You take a once in a lifetime talent like a Barry Sanders, not a big guy, by any means. Can you imagine him in some of these offenses in today's league?
Oh my gosh!
Right. Because you got to take into consideration. Like, I get mad sometimes when people try to discredit quarterbacks or running backs of yesteryear, especially when they try to discredit quarterbacks. Guys like Bradshaw, guys like Namath, guys that essentially were like the pioneers for bringing fame to and character to that position, because it was a completely different game. And what a lot of these knuckleheads that only want to look at the back of trading cards don't take into consideration is that in that era, you could not operate offense like you do now, because the defense had so many advantages, whereas now the defense is actually quite handicapped.
It is, especially.
And listen, great is great. Patrick Mahomes could play in any era. Tom Brady could play in any era. Tom Brady just wouldn't play 20 years in any era. You have certain guys that could, I think, even on a lesser scale, but still great quarterbacks. Eli Manning, I think he could have played in the 80s because I think he was tough like that. Brett Favre could have played in any era. He was tough like that. And, some guys, look at Dan Marino, dude. Look what he did in the 80s, putting up numbers that you only see now. So you got to respect the generational value of it, but I just hate some of these fans when they clearly can. It's not a fair comparison, but they will not account for how much the game has changed. It's just because so ignorant.
If there's one thing I will say about a lot of these fans is they're oblivious to how the NFL actually works, and they just base it off of this or that or whatever Colin Cowherd said. Yeah. Whenever I ask a fan of any fan base, and I think a lot of people know me as a guy that is very knowledgeable, especially in the sport of football, but whenever I go up and I ask fans to give me a reason why you like this or why are you saying that, and they can't quite give me that, not going to make a mention of anyone on our panel, but I'm just talking about fans in general. But, and it's like when all they could say is this, or when you say, hey, name me 5 players, or better yet, name me 3 players that are not named these guys that play for this respective team, and they can't do it. We're talking about they're the paper tigers of the NFL fan base. The guys that just, we're doing good. Shit, let me start cheering for them.
Our brother Quentin Moore, the Mask, is one of the biggest mouthpieces that would agree like-minded to what you just said, because that dude has like that much tolerance for that kind of stupidity. This division, does it still go down to week 18? I think that's the only question that I'm going to have to try to answer. You know what? After what I saw unravel here, it still might, and I'll tell you why. Because maybe, just maybe, this division still ends with Atlanta winning, but maybe, just maybe, it's that losing record again. Because, like anything else, you got to account for injuries. The South could be the new East. We'll just have to wait and see. But I will say this, after the way that you and Eric spun it, you kind of won me over with making sense. Because, yes, on paper, they did a lot, but they got to do it on the field. Last 30 seconds, Zappy, wrap it up.
I was going to say, I do believe this division, it's funny as you say that, Atlanta finishes the year on the road in New Orleans, but I actually have them losing that game and still.
But it might be a game that doesn't matter at that junction.
Exactly.
And after what we just saw with Kendry Miller, you got the Kamara thing. Now you're saying, go get Kareem Hunt. Lot to be decided. We can never
NFC
forecast
South.
injuries. NFC South
won't be the division that many people think it'll be. They'll be the bottom feeders. I love it.
We out.
Football's back.